Jay Johnson. He's also a TEDx speaker.
Emotional intelligence's long lost, ugly cousin that nobody invited to the party. We don't always have real control over our emotions. What we do have control over is how we react to them or how we behave following those emotions. And what they wanted to better understand is, why do humans do what we do? And they did a cross-disciplinary study. So they looked at neuroscience, they looked at evolutionary biology, they looked at anthropology, sociology, all of them, brought them all together and created the 4-drive framework.
Hello, I'm Mafalda. I'm a health and performance coach. Welcome to podcast Super Us. Today we have the pleasure of being with us Jay Johnson. He's a CEO of Course Creative Group. He's also an international renowned speaker. He speaks already in 20 different countries in 4 different continents. He's also a TEDx speaker. He's a coach, an author, a Forbes Business Council member, and also a consultant specialized in behavior performance. Thank you, Jay, for accepting the invitation for being here with me today.
Thank you
It's a
for having
pleasure.
me, Mafalda. It's my pleasure. Absolutely.
You talk a lot on your podcast and also on your TEDx talk. You speak a little bit about behavior intelligence. Can you start explaining what does this mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So behavioral intelligence is like emotional intelligence's long lost, ugly cousin that nobody invited to the party. So the term was first used in military application of uh, being able to understand the enemy's movements, being able to understand how they were reacting and shifting on a battlefield. But the modern day definition, and the one that we've created, is behavioral intelligence is the skills and abilities to accurately explain existing behavior. So being able to identify it, look at it, recognize where it's coming from, to predict future behavior, which is our ability to recognize the patterns and see those things and be able to address them, influence other people's behavior. And that is our capability of being able to connect with people and really softly influence them in a particular direction. And then control. That's our own behavior. How can we manage and control our own behavior to provide the best possible outcomes that we're looking to achieve? So that's behavioral intelligence. And we try to practice that and teach our clients how to essentially behave intelligently.
Yeah. So basically, there is a portion for the social part, and then the part of self improvement in terms of manage our own behaviors.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned about emotional intelligence, and there is a lot of talks, as you said, about emotional intelligence and also how can we improve our mindset. How do you relate the emotions, the thoughts, and the behavior part, and why is important to focus on behavior?
Mafalda, I love that question. And you said it in your question. Our behavior is the outcomes or the outputs of our thoughts and our feelings. And in reality, both our thoughts and feelings can be very automatic. So I may say, Mafalda, don't get mad at me when I tell you this, but you may still get mad at me, even though, it's one of those where I say, all right, well, I'm not going to get mad. We don't always have real control over our emotions. What we do have control over is how we react to them or how we behave following those emotions. So when we're working with clients, one of the things that we help them understand is, if you've ever had a thought go through your head that you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just thought that. Like, what's wrong with me? Or you've had an emotion that a week later you're like, I can't believe I reacted that way, or I can't believe I felt that way. That's normal. That's human. It's those thoughts plus those feelings that ultimately lead to behavior. So the behavior side, we focus on that because we can see it and we can choose a better behavioral pathway. So even though I might get really upset with my boss, I can choose to yell at them. I can choose to walk away. I can choose to find a different job. Those are the behaviors that we actually
Mhm.
have a strong sense of control over. And that's really the core of behavioral intelligence.
Yeah, so it's more palpable, it's more um, objective rather than the other parts, the emotion and the thoughts that is more automatic, as you said.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
You also talk a little bit about the elements and what are the four elements that constitute the behavior intelligence. Can you explain a little bit this concept and what are these four elements?
yeah, I'd love to. So, there was work done by two management scientists from Harvard University, Dr. Paul Lawrence and Dr. Nitin Noria. And what they wanted to better understand is, why do humans do what we do? And they did a cross disciplinary study. So they looked at neuroscience, they looked at evolutionary biology, they looked at anthropology, sociology, all of them, brought them all together and created the four drive framework. Now, the four drives, which every single one of us as a human being have, come from our ancestral lineage. So think about like an old, our ancient ancestors, pre civilization. You know, the human species, we've been on the planet for 185,000 years. That's the earliest known fossil evidence. Civilization's only 8 to 10,000 years old. So that's a long time that we had to evolve different aspects of our brain. And what Paul
Hmm.
Lawrence and Nitin Noria ultimately ended up coming up with is there were four drives that were present in our ancient ancestors, and those have carried through to the modern day. They helped us survive. The drives are the drive to acquire. That's our need for resources, our sort of sense of hunting and gathering, our goals, our competition, our focus on results. We have a drive to bond, which is our connection. We recognize humans can't really live in isolation. We don't do well with that. COVID taught us that very, very well. So we have a
True.
strong sense to affiliate and to be accepted and to bond with other people. We have a drive to defend. We had to protect our resources. We had to create systems and structures and processes in order to help us plan for future events and to manage, the resources that we had and defend ourselves from other, potential threats. And then the last drive is the drive to learn. We had to learn how to create tools, build fires. We had to explore new territories. So those four drives, what we did was we actually created an assessment that measures how those drives influence us. It's a little bit different than a personality assessment because in the behavioral elements, you have all four drives and each drive has to be fulfilled. So it's not like you can just only have one or only lean into two of them. It's really about every decision that we make feels the push and the pull of each of those drives. Some of those drives have a stronger influence, and that's what we measure with our assessment. So we help people understand what it is that's driving their behavior. Am I motivated by competition or am I more motivated by social interaction and connection?
Mhm.
Do I communicate in a systematic way or am I much more open and flowing in my communication? And those relate to the drives, which are mapped to our neurotransmitters and essentially our cognitive brain.
Okay, so for this, if I understood correctly, we have one. So I did the assessment and I'm heard. Uh, this means that this is my core element, but you are saying that I have in each decision that I make, it's like a pull and push from each element. Do you have any case study that you can give an example just to be more a little bit more clear?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and Mafalda, what I'll do is I'll send you your full results afterwards so that way you can see what your actual
Okay.
measurements are. Okay. But
Yeah.
as an earth element, more than likely, you're probably very structured, detail oriented, organized. Like one of the examples that I would give is you and I scheduled this time for a longer duration than we'd actually be talking. That's a very earth
Yeah.
behavior because you're planning for any contingencies, any processes, any challenges that we may face, so that way we can overcome them. I was just like, as soon as that happened, I was like, she's probably an earth. But let me give you an example of a decision. Imagine your best friend at the office brings in a gigantic chocolate cake. Now, your initial reaction when you smell it and it looks so delightful, your initial reaction might be, "Ooh, I want that." That's the drive to acquire. Our dopaminergic, dopamine
Yeah.
induced, I want it. Okay. But then a second voice comes into our head and says, "Oh, but the calories and the sugar, I probably shouldn't have that." That's the drive to defend. That's telling us, okay, we need to be more systematic in how we're approaching things. But then another voice pops into the head and says, "But my friend Mafalda, brought this to me, and I'd feel really guilty if I don't have a piece of this cake." That's the drive to bond at play.
Yeah.
So now we're feeling like, okay, well, I'm connected and it's social. I should be doing this. Then that fourth voice comes in and says, okay, I'll take the stairs for the rest of the day and I'll figure out a way to reduce the calorie impact, or I'll just have a small piece. That's the drive to learn. We're creatively thinking, how can we solve this problem? So in that one decision, all four of the drives push and pull till ultimately we say, yes, I would like a piece of cake, but just a small one, please. Or we say, no, thank you. This time I have to be able to step back because I'm on a diet and I shouldn't be having that cake, right? When we encounter things in business or in entrepreneurship, each of these drives has an impact and a pull on us. When one of our
Hmm.
drives is really, really strong, say the drive to acquire is much stronger than, say, the drive to defend, we may find ourselves saying, yes, I'll have that cake. Consequences be damned. Let's go
Yeah.
for it. Let's try it. Versus with maybe an earth, it might be, hey, let's approach this slowly. We're going to not make a decision yet because I want to analyze all the possibilities. I want to make sure that this is the right path, and I want to make sure that we have a good strategy in going forward. So, what we try to teach our people is it's all about balance. And if we can find balance in the drives and we understand what's pushing those decisions, we can make
Yeah.
better decisions in moving forward.
Yeah. Makes sense. And is it possible for a person to be, um, let's say, pulled from different elements depending on this on the situation? Let's say if it's a um, career decision, or if it's a relationship decision, is it possible for different areas be influenced by different elements?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the interesting thing about these drives is we are very capable. That's another beautiful thing about the assessment. Being high in something doesn't mean that you're good at it, and being low at it doesn't mean that you're bad at it. So for example,
Okay.
earth is actually my lowest element, okay? Now bear with me here. I'm a behavioral scientist. I'm a researcher. I do methodological studies that require detail, focus, or organization, structure, planning, and processes in order to make sure that those research studies are valid, reliable, and repeatable. If
Hmm.
my earth was that low, I shouldn't be good at it, but that's not the case. It's low, which means I have to be more intentional about using my earth. I know earth and that structure, that process, that systems thinking is going to help me be successful. So while I can stand on a stage and speak for 8 hours and afterwards I feel super energized, if I do that, say, research methodology study, it may be a half hour and I might feel exhausted or depleted because it's not my natural tendency. And what this helps us understand is even for work, I lean into my earth quite frequently. Search engine optimization is another great example. Very detailed work, syllable by syllable, line by line. But behavioral intelligence, if you search it on Google, I come up first. And the reason for that is because it's not necessarily something that I loved doing or I was really excited about, but I wanted to win. So I have a stronger drive to acquire my fire element. I want to win. And therefore, as I start moving up the ranks, that's what brought me the motivation to kind of focus more energy on that task until it was complete. So we can use the elements that we have a stronger leaning towards to help us motivate even the challenging tasks that we have. And yes, in
Hmm.
different instances, I know that I have to activate my water element, my drive to bond, when I'm working with my team. So I am much more of a water when I'm leading a team because I know that that connection and that collaboration is essential for the team's success. I still want to win, I still have that drive to acquire, but I'm going to utilize those other elements and those other drives to help create the best behaviors for the situation. Does that make sense, Mafalda?
So basically, if I understood, this means that this assessment is, let's say, a baseline, but then we can try to understand how can we improve in the ones that we get the lowest score, let's say, and also how can we use the others that we have a higher score to motivate us to improve the one with the lowest score.
It's exactly right. What we say is behavior is a choice, and we can choose a better behavioral pathway. And that's really the core of behavioral intelligence is being able to say, hey, you know what? When I come in and if I'm fire and I'm being very direct and results focused and driven and goal oriented, and I'm like, pick up the phone, team, smile and dial, we need more sales. My team's going to look at me and go, that's not what I'm here for. That's not what I'm looking at. Right. But if I come in and say, hey, team, together, we can really work on building out a platform that's going to help everybody
Mhm.
win, that's going to be a little bit more aligned. So even the way that I use my language is going to be more direct with how, choosing to go in a more bond way. I'm going to use different language to really create a connection with somebody that's not a fire element. If they are a fire
Yeah,
element, I might go to them and just say, hey, let's do this. We're going to win. And they're going to go, yes. But not everybody feels that way.
yeah, yeah. True. You mentioned that behavior is a choice. When we think that our thoughts and our emotions influence our actions, um, how what how can we do to be more in control of our behavior, our actions, take into consideration that our thoughts and our emotions influence our behaviors?
Yeah. So, first is awareness. Once we're aware of what actually causes those reactions or what those patterns of behaviors are, then we can make a choice. This pattern is a good pattern and it's been serving us well. This pattern is
Yeah.
not a good pattern and we need to change it. So, being aware of what's pushing those decisions or what's creating those patterns, that's why we created behavioral elements to help people understand that. After we
Hmm.
understand what it is that's doing it, well, all right, I still have these thoughts, I still have these feelings. So, how do I navigate the world? One of the best ways, and it's really interesting because it's super simple, is taking a deep breath. And let me share this with you. I want you to imagine our ancient ancestors, and they're in they're in the savannah, and a lion shows up. Now, our ancient ancestors probably looked at the lion, knew it was a threat, and decided to run as fast as they could away from it. So there's our flight reaction. If the lion had us cornered, we'd fight it. There's our fight reaction. That's our natural inclination when we feel under threat from our thoughts or our
Hmm.
feelings or anything else. But let me think about it this way. Do you think that our ancient ancestors stopped, took a deep breath, and exhaled and gained control of their body before they started screaming and running? Probably not. So, taking a
Yeah.
deep breath or two deep breaths is a really powerful way for us to reset our limbic system, our fight, flight, faint, freeze, befriend response. So really what that does is, number one, puts more oxygen into the system, allows us to think more clearly and effectively. But number two, and this is how we classify behaving intelligently. If we have our thoughts plus our feelings and that equals our behavior, we want to make that equal sign a little bit longer. Taking a deep breath gives us 2 seconds to sort of calm ourselves and make a better decision. It can even
Yeah.
be something like taking a 5 minute recess, like, hey, I need to make this decision, but I'm going to take a step back for 5 minutes, take deep breath, and really kind of calm myself, and then approach that decision more logically and rationally than just the thoughts or emotions that are currently swirling around. Does that make sense, Mafalda?
Yeah. Yeah. So we are basically changing our physiology, moving from our fight and or flight to our calming state, and this gave us time to reflect and to redefine, if that's the case, our thoughts and our feelings, so we can make better, behave better actions.
Yeah, there's some really incredible neuroscientific studies that show a couple of different things. In one, they took a group of people, split them in half, and the
Mhm.
first part of the group, they were told, before you answer the questions on a standardized test, we want you to pause, take a deep breath, and then answer the question. And they told the second group, answer your gut instinct as fast as you can. And then they wanted to see who did better. And every single one of those experiments, the group that paused, took a deep breath, and then answered the question outperformed the group that just did it on gut reaction. And that was an interesting study because one of the things that we hear is whatever your first reaction is, just go with it. And that actually does not always hold true. The second
Yeah.
study is they had them do problem solving, and it was the same thing. They actually put two groups. One group was shown happy, joyful, fun, entertaining content, and then asked to do a standardized test. The other group was shown sad images and mournful music and things that would have put them sort of in a more depressed state and asked to do the test. And in every
Yeah.
one of those experiments, the happy, smiling, entertained, joyful group outperformed the other group by nearly 31%. So when we're happy and when we're calm, we are much smarter, we're much more impactful, and we're much more capable of delivering the behaviors that will serve us well, as opposed to when we're in a emotion state or a thought provoked state. We might be more
Yeah.
reactive, and then we may regret it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the first study that you mentioned is interesting because, as you said, a lot of times, okay, it's we need to take the decision based on our gut feelings, and this may be true for some people, but I think this require, at least my understanding, this will require a different baseline. So this will require that the person is not living on in a state of fear, because otherwise the gut decision will be a decision made on fear. So I think it uh, maybe it can work for some people, but it depends on the baseline of each person. And majority of the times, for people that are living majority of the time in fight or flight, then this study will it will make more sense for the waiting time will work. And I think it will be interesting to see in the study what was the, of course, that is hard to analyze, but it will be interesting to know what were the people, the sample that they use, if there were people more living more in the fight or flight, or people that have more that were already using some techniques for moving to manage their emotions.
Yeah. Well, and what you said, Mafalda, is absolutely right. There is a power in our gut instinct, and our
Yeah.
instincts are honed for survival. So in many cases, our gut reaction or our gut choice may be an accurate reflection. But in complicated, say, business decisions, or in
Yeah.
complicated, in complicated life decisions, it's generally better that we analyze the data, we look at all possible sides, and even if we had a gut reaction, and maybe that gut reaction was the right reaction, being able to
Yeah.
analyze multiple pathways is always going to lead us to a better decision than what we might just have instinctively or initially.
Yeah. And me as a herd person, I agree. I totally agree with you that we should have the data to have a better decision. Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and we were talking a little bit now about the one of the first pillars that you mentioned about behavior intelligence, that is how to, let's say, manage our own behaviors. Um, the other two pillars that you mentioned were the how can we predict the reactions, the behaviors of others, and also the meaning of their actions. What is the, let's say, the impact of leveraging these two pillars in our life? And do you have any, what could be the first steps to try to develop these two pillars?
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, think about it this way, and a lot of people may have this experience. The first time, maybe you've started to date a partner, and you're bringing them to meet your family. And in the car on the way to taking them to meet your family, you look at your partner and you say, "Hey, listen, my brother is probably going to say something that is offensive, or they're going to do something and it's going to be obnoxious. Don't worry about it, just let it go." You have now just predicted a behavioral pattern. You've seen different aspects
Yeah.
of the behavior, and now you recognize that there's a pattern to it. So, we as human beings are very good at identifying these patterns. The challenge
Mm-hmm.
is that sometimes those patterns don't always serve us. I may assume that my brother's going to, make an obnoxious statement, and then my brother's great during that event, and I'm surprised. I'm like, wow, he really behaved himself, or something of that nature, right? So sometimes those patterns hold true, and sometimes those patterns don't hold true. When we
Mm-hmm.
help people understand those patterns, this is also where behavioral elements comes in. When we think about, say, for example, somebody with a high earth preference, I'm going to be able to assume if I come in every day and I'm like, "Mafalda, I've got this brand new idea, it's great, let's do this today, we're going to do this," you're going to look at me eventually and just be like, "Slow down, we haven't thought this through, we haven't looked at the strategic plan, we haven't decided on this," or so on and so forth. But if I come in and I say, "Mafalda, knowing that you're an earth and a structured person, here's my idea. Here's how I think it fits our policies. Here's how I think it fits the strategic plan. This is how I think we can operationalize it. This is the budget. Now, I know that I'm
Mm-hmm.
missing something, Mafalda. Can you take a week, review this, and tell me what gaps I have?" Immediately, I know, because of your behavioral preference, the second option probably felt a lot more comfortable
Yeah.
than the first option. And this is where, when we understand how these drives impact us, it allows us to choose behaviors that are much more fitting to the people that we're
Yeah.
interacting with. So, in
Mm-hmm.
return, Mafalda may learn, uh, hey, Jay is a fire element, and Jay likes to be a little unstructured, and he likes to go fast. So, if Jay comes in with this great new idea, telling Jay no is probably a good way for Jay to figure out how to do it anyways. So, that's where something like learning to say, "Let's do a thumbtack rule. Jay, this seems like a great idea. Let's put a thumbtack in that. Let's think about this for a week. And then if it's still as exciting to you in a week,
Yeah.
we'll come back and we'll, put that into practice." And that's
Yeah.
that sort of like behaving intelligently, is being able to understand each of our direct needs, what drives us. Because my intention's not to stress you out. Your intention's not to stress me out. So now we just need to navigate that behavioral pathway. So when we learn to
Mm-hmm.
explain where did those behaviors come from, and predict how is this person going to behave now and in the future, it gives us the ability to have a better choice in how we show up, how we react, or how we respond to situations to reduce conflict, to make better decisions, to lead more
Yeah.
effectively, to communicate more effectively, and all of the different aspects that are essential for entrepreneurs and business owners.
Hmm. And how, of course, that when we are talking about personal relationships, let's say family, it's maybe it's easier to understand which element are we talking about. Um, how can we try to do this to understand what is the element of the other person when it's a person that we are meeting for the first time?
Yeah. So when I send you the assessment results, it's got 27 pages and it actually says fire elements will tend to do this, air elements will tend to do
Okay.
this. So that's going to give you a really good understanding. But one of the things that I would offer is if you hadn't taken the assessment, that's okay. Look for what it is that's motivating somebody. Okay. And when we say that
Hmm.
is, okay, why? That's my key question for every single behavior I see. Because sometimes, you see a behavior and you react to it. You get frustrated with it, you get angry with it, maybe you get sad by it, maybe you get joyful by it. But if we can pause ourselves just a little bit and take a step back and say, why did Jay feel the need to do this? And then really
Yeah.
analyze that and start coming up with ideas. Okay, well, Jay seems very ambitious. He seems very driven. He seems very focused. He seems very goal oriented. Okay. So Jay is going to I can make deductions at that point. If Jay is
Yeah.
goal oriented, what happens when I tell Jay no? Or when I put a barrier in front of Jay and his objective? Or if I slow down the team from getting to that goal? Jay's going to show
Hmm.
frustration. He's going to show contempt. He's going to show anger. He's going to do his own thing, or he's going to disassociate. So when we look at some of those sort of uh, the reasons behind people do it. Once we can explain, okay, this is how Jay shows up, that means that he's probably going to do that. We can track those patterns more effectively. Does that make sense, Mafalda?
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Um, and the the last pillar that you mentioned is the how can we influence the behaviors of others? How can we start doing this without having the feeling that we are, let's say, tricking the other person or not being honest with ourselves and or also with others?
Yeah, I love that because the first thing that I always tell people with influence is be careful that it doesn't turn into manipulation, right? When we're
Yeah,
influencing somebody, we want to make sure that our influence is ethical and that it's
yeah,
not something that's going to create harm for them. So if you and I are in a discussion about which movie we want to go see, and I influence you to come see the movie that I've been looking at and really wanting to see, but I make a promise and say, okay, but next time you get to choose. All right, well, that's an influence where there's not really harm
compromise.
to it. But if I
Yeah,
influence you to invest all of your money into something that I know is not going to work, that would be more of the manipulation side. So I'm always cautious
mhm,
to help people make sure that they say, am I creating harm or hurt for somebody else? But as a
yeah,
leader, whether you're a leader in your family, whether you're a leader in your business, whether you're a leader in your community, we have some levels of influence. And the reality is the reason that people are influenced by us is usually because we've built trust with them. One of the fastest ways to build trust, as any salesperson will tell you, is to create a connection, is to build rapport with the other person.
yeah,
So if I'm in a workplace and my drive to acquire my fire element and your drive to earth are working together, I know that I'm going to be able to build more trust with you if I approach you in the way that you would want to be approached. Treat people as they want to
yeah,
be treated. So I would come and I'd be respectful of how your systematic processing focused, drives would play. And I'm not going to come and say, Mafalda, I need a decision on this right this second. Give me your decision right now, because that's going to immediately put you in a very uncomfortable spot. And if we trust each other, I'm going to know, let's not do that, because if I do this a bunch of times, Mafalda's eventually going to go, Jay, I can't do this anymore. And I'm not trusting you to really respect my boundaries, respect my side, my privacy, my time, my thought process, all of those pieces. So it's really about influence is really about being able to build liking and rapport. If people like you, they'll do business with you. If they don't like you,
Yeah.
they will make it their business to disrupt you. So it's about building trust. And we do that really by creating connection. And we create connection by authentically seeing the other person's motivations, drives, and influences, and being able to manage our drives in a nice collaboration and a nice coordination with them.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. And the quote that you said, sometimes, and I remember that when I was young, I was always hearing, treat others like you wanted to be treated. But in fact, it's a little bit the opposite: is treat the others how they wanted to be treated. And knowing what is their element, it's easier to manage this and to, let's say, manage our behaviors according what how the other person want to be treated.
Exactly right. Yep.
Yeah. um I would like to ask you, if is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewers?
So I would love to encourage you to go to behavioralelements.com and take the assessment. It's free. You can take a free one. It'll give you a 6-page summary with your primary element. And that's a great first step in improving your behavioral intelligence, which we all know that behavior is a choice, and how we choose to behave ultimately will determine our success and failure. So that can be a great step. And I'd love to connect with your audience on LinkedIn and answer any questions they may have.